Hello, my name is Joe Bravo. I'm the head football coach at Mountain Range High School in Westminster, Colorado. In this video, we're going to look at some aspects of the special team, primarily the return type of aspects. We're going to go over punt return, kickoff return, and then we'll also take a look at the PAT block and some of the things to keep in mind there. What we'll do is we'll go over the basic principles, some things that should be considered when designing for your specific team, and then we'll show you what we do and why we do it specifically at Mountain Range High School. You'll want to design what you do for the personnel and system and schemes that you use, but the topics or ideas that we bring up should probably be considered along the way. Let's take a look at punt return. Punt return considerations when you're designing your punt return. Some things that you want to have in mind is when are you going to go for the block and when are you going to set up the return. One of the things that we do at Mountain Range is we really don't have a return. We're going to go for the block each time. We feel like forcing a bad punt is going to give us field position, a better field position, a higher probability of the time than if we set up a return. However, you might have some real good speed kids and want to set up a return. When are you going to do which? That's something to be considered. Are you going to be a middle return? You're going to have your kids block to the outside and then run a middle return, or you're going to try and run a wall return? And if you do, which side are you going to run to? Either side, or are you going to specifically try and run their wall to one side or the other? A lot of teams like to run it to their bench. At what points are you going to leave the defense on the field and just run an unsure punt? It's going to probably change from week to week, but it should be thought about previous. When is it where you're not sure if that opponent's going to punt or run a fake or simply run an offensive play? Leave your defense on the field. Just run an unsure punt, drop back your free safety for a return type of guy. Next, something to be considered is who's going to substitute. Knowing that the punting team probably isn't going to huddle. They're going to run directly on from the sideline. You're going to need to know who's going to substitute and make that decision knowing that it's going to have to happen pretty quickly. So if you're going to be substituting a defensive end, for example, that person might have a longer distance to run if he's on the opposite side from your bench than if you're going to substitute one of the inside guys. Little things like that should be thought of in your substitution pattern. Finally, in your punt return considerations, whether you're going for a block or setting up a return, you need to ask yourself who's going to be responsible for forcing the kick. Too many times, nobody comes after the punter. He's able to hold on to the football for a longer time than expected, allowing for the coverage to get downfield. You need someone, whether you're going for the block or not, to be forcing the quickest kick possible. So with these ideas and considerations, you can design something that's going to work for your team, your personnel. At Mountain Range High School, these are the principles that we use. As I've already stated, we really don't have a true return. We're going to try and block every punt, or if we're not sure, we will be set up for unsure punt. We feel like blocking or forcing a bad punt is going to result in better field position than a return more times than not. We also try and create a blocking situation where the nature of it allows us to have some sort of ability to return. At Mountain Range, we're going to take our down linemen, and every single one of them is going to line up in a sprinter stance. We're going to make sure that their eyes are on the football because we never want anybody to jump off and give our opponents a first down. So we run drills specifically for that. Sprinter stance, get off the ball, but don't jump off sides. Any sort of drill that we run regarding punt return will never be on sound. It'll always be on ball movement, just to increase the number of reps our players get at keeping their eyes on the ball and not jumping off sides. The aiming point for all the players is going to, that are on a blocking course are going to be 1 yard in front of the punter. We emphasize not leaving our feet and running by the punter, accelerating through the punter. We feel like we can get there just as well that way as we can leaving our feet, and we have less risk of running in or creating a roughing the punter type of penalty. Finally, if you're going to send somebody off the edge, the way we do it, we're going to send somebody off the edge. We call one side or the other. We never send people from both sides off the edge because they're going to end up knocking each other off or pulling back because out of the corner of their eye they see them. So in any sort of block strategy, come from one side or the other, but never both. We're going to come from one side or the other, and then we also have some kids coming up the middle on a little bit different technique. Okay, some more properties or principles that we have with our punt block team. Our edge rushers, they're going to run by the punter. They're going to cross their hands as they go by the punter, trying to take the ball right off the punter's shoe. We're going to accelerate through the punter. We're not going to lay out. We just feel like we can get there just as quick, and if we have a proper aiming point, and have a lot less risk of running into the punter if we don't leave our feet. We always have somebody responsible for the personal protectors. It doesn't do us any good to come off the edge just to be picked up by a personal protector. So we're always going to send somebody and make sure that they are occupying the personal protector to allow those kids that are better block specialists to come off free. Also, importantly, we do not let the ball hit the ground. Our return man will not let the ball hit the ground if at all possible. He'll fair catch if necessary. We're not worried about getting a big return. We're going to force a bad punt with our rush or block it. All we ask for him to do is not let the ball hit the ground. So if he needs to fair catch, do so, but do not let the ball hit the ground. We will get our field position in that manner as opposed to trying to be a hero and get a big return. Also, some principles involved in our punt return. The same coach that's responsible for aligning the returner at the proper depth from scouting reports and from pregame observations, if that's at 30 yards or 35 yards, whatever, that same coach is also going to assist the return guy in letting him know if he should fair catch or not. The reason we want to use the same coach is because the player is used to hearing that voice in telling him where to align. It helps him then hearing the same voice as far as fair catch or no fair catch. So he's more tuned in to that voice than any other, and it will eliminate a little bit of confusion in a very confusing situation. We emphasize our players to listen to and echo any Peter calls. I assume that most punt return teams will do something similar to that. The only thing that maybe we do different is we tell kids to echo it. So as soon as they hear a Peter call or get away, whatever it is that your team uses, that player needs to echo it, and pretty soon all 11 are yelling that and more likely to respond to it than if you don't get that echo. So the return guy gives the getaway or Peter call, and everybody else echoes it until that information is communicated throughout the team. We like to put pressure on the punter, so we'll only put one return guy back, but we know that you're able to kick away from one return guy. Many coaches are so adamant about not letting the ball touch the ground as they'll put two returners back. That gives you a little bit of an advantage, and it's harder to kick away, but you've lost one player up front to put pressure on the kicker. Final principle we'll talk about here is the majority of the punt return team is going to be the defense that's on the field. We want to minimize the number of substitutes that we need to make. This is because the punt team is probably going to run straight on and not huddle. Also, we want to have the ability to run unsure or safe punt return where we don't know if our opponent's going to punt or not. So the punt return team is basically the defense that's on the field with a couple of exceptions. In our system, we'll take our tackles out and put tall defensive end type of kids in their place because they're going to be more athletic and give us a better opportunity to try and block. And then if we had to, in our situation we don't, but if we had to, we would replace the free safety or a linebacker with a return type of guy so that we have the people back to return and we've gotten the tackles off the field that are probably less athletic and unable to do some of the things we ask for our punt return team to do. Okay, let's take a look at the punt block left. With the punt block left, we're going to be bringing our block personnel from the left. We number our players 1 through 10. What would be number 11, simply our return guy. We have one returner back deep, one punt returner back deep, and his only real job is to catch the football. The block is coming from the left where we have an overload. We pair up our players. So 1 and 2 act as a pair. 3 and 4 act as a pair. 5 and 6 act as a pair. They have similar responsibilities, and so all we're doing is saying this tight end here might pick up number 1 or he might pick up number 2, but he can't pick up both of you. So whichever one comes free then executes the remainder of the punt block sequence. Our best block guys are these number 1 and 2 guys. They're going to come free most often. 3 and 4 here, same thing. They're going to be sandwiching the tackle between them The tackle might pick up number 3, might pick up number 4, but isn't going to pick up both of them. Their job, whether it's 3 or 4 that comes through, they're going to run in front of the personal protector to occupy the personal protector. They're still going to try and get a hand out in front of the punter, but they're going to make sure they cross the face of the personal protector. The block is probably coming from 1 and 2, not from 3 and 4. We're simply making the personal protector pick us up as opposed to the true block guys. 5 and 6, these are our defensive end, tall type of kids. They're both lining up in A gap. Remember, we got to stay off the center in this case, so number 6 needs to be aware that he cannot hit the center. It'd be a penalty to hit a defenseless center. So 5 and 6 are coming off through A gap. They are not necessarily running through the punter. They're going to attack whatever personal protectors they can, and they're simply going to leap and get as high as they can, trying to block the punt in that manner. Remember, we don't have to block the punt to be successful here. We can simply force a bad kick and still get what it is we want. Better field position, better chance or opportunity to score because of that field position. Now, as the block continues, if we do not get a block, we simply bend around, and now we're going to have a return right. So block left creates return right. If we called block right, everything here would flip-flop, and it would end up being a return left. So the return, what return there is, will always be away from the block call. Away from the block call, we have 3 players. We have 4 players here. Number 7 aligns in A gap, but he's not going to stay there. Upon the cadence sequence of our opponent, he's going to drop back over the top of the left-hand side, and just be aware of any fake. Since we're sending that entire side to block, we are susceptible to fake to that side, so that's going to help us out should we get fake. If there isn't a fake, he's going to turn back around and try and take care of the center, who's unaccounted for in this scheme. So we're going to try and pick up the center with our linebacker. We feel like our linebacker is probably a better athlete than their center. We feel like we can do that. Numbers 8, 9, and 10 here, they all are going to have the same technique. They are going to attack the punt team personnel in their outside half. So they're going to attack the outside shoulder. They want to beat them off the ball and get into that personnel, as opposed to letting the punt team get into our defensive personnel. They're simply going to attack his outside half and then ride those players to the inside, trying to make a little bit of a wedge here, or a little bit of an opening, so we can get our wedge around and set up a little bit of return. Number 1 or number 2, whoever comes free, is going to go backwards against the punt return, and just in case we do break it, we'll clear out any chasers. So we feel like we've got a pretty decent wedge return here, wall return, and yet we've given an opportunity to go after a block, force a bad punt. Our only other punt return that we run at Mountain Range is an unsure punt. We simply leave our defense on the field. We're going to run man coverage in this case, man free, so the free safety does not have coverage responsibility. You might call it one lock, man free. We're going to run with any motion, and we're going to assume that they're going to fake this punt, even though they probably will end up punting it. We're making the assumption that it's a fake, and we're just going to leave our defense on the field. So in this case, our corner is going to be lined up and manned up with number 1. If number 1 were to change in this formation, that corner would go with them. Whoever is your man to start this from alignment is going to remain. We're not going to bump like we might do on defense, because we're afraid that'll cause confusion. We'll run with motion. The strong safety's got number 2 to the strong side. The inside backers share number 3, man coverage. The outside backer weak is going to take number 2, and the weak side corner is going to take number 1 to his side. Again, if either one of these slots go in motion, the strong safety or the backer will run with it. We're not going to bump. The defensive linemen, they are going to play a regular defensive technique, their normal technique. They're going to attack the lineman in front of them, attack the V of the neck of the lineman in front of them. They're not going to get deeper than heel line. We do not need people rushing the punter. All we need to make sure is that the ball is kicked in this place. The only 2 people that will rush the punter are the inside linebackers. One of them is responsible with the number 3 The punter will be number 3, either strong or weak, so one of them is going to be responsible for him. We're going to do what we call as a red dog blitz here. In other words, we're going to blitz through the person we're responsible. So should there be a fake and that punter take off for some sort of throwback, the inside linebacker is going to be responsible. Should the up back decide to run to the flat, that linebacker to that side is responsible. So we are going to be rushing, but we're going to rush through the person that is our man responsibility, so that if it is fake, we still have that personnel covered up. A fake that is often successful is some sort of pass to the punter. Oftentimes when teams are designing a defense, they'll forget to account for the punter. So we try not to make that mistake. In unsure punt, our free safety drops back to the appropriate distance from the line of scrimmage, depending on our opponent's punter. And the free safety in this case, we've worked on it throughout the week, is probably going to call a fair catch. So it's unlikely that we get any return in unsure punt. In a lot of cases, we're not even worried about the return, so the free safety knows that there's a high probability that the coach from the sidelines will be calling from a fair catch. Again, we just don't want the ball hitting the ground. If they have punted and we've taken over possession of the ball, we feel that's a success when we're in our unsure punt mode. Okay, now let's take a look at some video of what we've been talking about with unsure punt or punt return, punt block combinations that we use at Mountain Range High School. Okay, let's take a look at some punt block video. Here we have our punt block team on the field. We've got our 2 blockers from the outside coming here. We've had to walk out number 2 and number 10 here with the wideouts. We're going to come off the edge here at the same time. We're going to send someone to occupy the personal protector, and our 2 inside kids are going to rush and try and get as high as they can here. Remember, you don't have to block a punt. You just need to force a bad punt to be successful on this play. Let's take a look. Okay, you can see how the personal protector is not a factor in blocking here because we've got too many people coming up the inside. So it leaves our outside blocker free. We're going to run across his face, crossing our hands, as opposed to laying out. We're going to try and take the ball right off the foot. Once a ball is blocked, there's no sense in trying to recover it. Simply pick it up and run with it. Okay, here we take a look at our punt return, our punt block team. We've got our outside block this time coming from the right. We've got our inside personnel coming from the inside here, so all the block comes from this side. Over here, we're simply lined up. We're just going to occupy these people just in case we get a return. In our system, if we're blocking from the right, the return goes to the left. So in this case, we're going to be returning to the side without the block. Our inside personnel here, our middle linebacker, at the start of the cadence, he's going to back up and try and pick up the center, but also help us out with fake away from our block side. Here's an example where we don't block it, but we force a bad kick. Good things happen when we pressure the punter. See our kids in the middle getting off the ball, get to the point, and then just jump straight up. We're going to stay off the punt at all costs. In this case, even though the return is being set up to the left, the ball went to the right, so we just got to take what we can get. Now we'll take a look at some of considerations when designing your kickoff return team. Some of the things that you might want to consider as you put together your kickoff return sequence. First of all, are you going to be an area or man blocking scheme, or are you going to use some combination of both? If you are going to be a man blocking scheme, you have to decide, well, how are you going to number or label the kickoff team? Do you want to go 1 through 10? Do you count the kicker? Do you not count the kicker? 1 through 5 from the left, 1 through 5 from the right. How are you going to identify who's blocking who? Just by giving your opponent some sort of number lettering system, however you're going to do it. If you're going to do area blocking, that's not necessarily as important, and now you don't need to worry about that numbering scheme. All right, you're going to have to decide whether you're going to be a wedge, a cross, or a wall return. This is kind of dependent on the personnel that you have. If you're a little bit bigger and slower, then you might want to run a wedge or a double wedge. If you're not very big, but you have pretty good team speed, you might want to do some sort of middle cross where you can get kids across the field and simply ride blockers or ride players out of the play. Don't have to have a devastating block. Finally, you might want to set up a wall return. You can blend in with your team if you run the wall return to your bench. Most kickoff teams don't see it very often, so sometimes there's an advantage to running a wall return. So depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you'll probably pick one of those methods of return. Next, you're going to want to maximize the personnel that you have on the field. I would suggest not putting linemen out on the kickoff return. They're simply not mobile enough to get the job done. Maximize the use of running backs, tight ends, linebackers, defensive ends, any athlete that you have that has some size to them but yet can still run. That would be the type of personnel to put on the kickoff return. If you should have some bigger kids and you're running a wedge return, have them be in the second wedge, not the first wedge. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the wedge return. Use scouting reports to identify the kickoff team, your opponent, and what they're trying to do. Are they switching lanes? Who are the safeties? Who are the contained type of personnel? This will impact how you block your return. For example, you may not block the safeties or even count them in the numbering system for your blocking scheme because you know they're going to hang back, and you'll let it be a one-on-one, your return guy against their safety. You'll take your chances there. So those types of things are going to change week to week depending on what your opponent does. Make sure that you change as well. Have a plan for squib kicks. Make sure your kids know that should your opponent squib kick to you, what they're going to do. Are they going to let it go and try and get back to the deep personnel? Are the people that are going to be closest to the ball just simply fall on it? Are you going to pick it up and try and run with it? Simply have a plan and have it practice what occurs on squib kicks. Our kick return philosophy at Mountain Range High School is we have two separate returns. We have a double wedge return, which is an area blocking type of scheme, and we have a Moses return. Some of the principles or philosophies that we have is we want athletic personnel on our kickoff return. Field position is too important to try and give somebody a rest during this particular play. We'll go ahead and rest them on offense or defense if they're a two-way player, but we're not going to rest players on special teams. Next, the front five personnel have to make sure that the ball is kicked. We've gotten tricked a couple of times with onside kicks, and we've learned our lesson. We're not going to leave until the ball is kicked away, so our front five are actually expecting an onside kick at any time. One of the things that I would note here is you should especially be aware of an onside kick should you have had a penalty previous to this play. So if on a scoring play, your team is given a penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct or some other large penalty, and on the kickoff, that ball is moved 15 yards forward, you can expect an onside kick. The kicking opponent has nothing to lose at that point. They already have decent field position, so there's a good chance that they will try an onside kick at that point. So any kick that is preceded by a penalty against us, we will assume we're going to get an onside kick. Our plan for squib kicks is the squib kicks are fielded by the closest player. They're simply going to get two hands on the ball and get straight up field for as many yards as they can. There's not going to put on any moves or try and be hero and score. We're just getting as much yardage as we can, and we're not going to fumble the football. In our back wall, we have our bigger, slower players not used to handling the football, so all we want them to do is make sure they don't turn the ball over and get as much yardage as possible. Finally, it's important to stress that all players realize that the ball is live as soon as it's kicked. They have the ability to call for a fair catch if needed, but we cannot let the ball lay on the ground, and that it's not like a punt. This is a live ball, and we can fair catch if needed. Here we have our wedge return. We'll talk about the principles involved with the wedge return. We have our players up front numbered 1 through 5. Next level are going to be 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then we have 2 returners, one on the left and one on the right. Our bigger, more physical players are actually players 6, 7, 8, and 9. They're going to be the back wedge. Our mobile, smaller players are going to be the front wedge. That's because when we set up our front wedge, those players are going to get to an aiming point. They're going to open and they're going to run to either a designated player or anybody that's going to cross their face. So those players will run to an area. They have to be a little bit quicker to get planted, turn and go, and they don't need a devastating block. They just need to get on the inside shoulder of the kickoff team member and just ride him down the field. Take him really any way he wants to go, preferably outside. Those are going to be more athletic players. Our bigger, more physical players are in the second wedge. They too are going to get to their aiming point, but they will not leave the wall. Once they're in the wall, they'll try and move forward as a single body in unison and not leave the wall no matter what. The return players will first communicate who's going to catch the ball, you, me type of thing. We typically have only one player that is responsible for verbalizing that. It's going to be either the player on the right or the left. It's going to be our better return guy is responsible for verbalizing the you, me, who's going to get it. The other player then, the other return guy, will escort the returner to the wall, looking to pick up the first person down. Usually, if you can get your returner to the wall, you're going to have a successful return. Where this return breaks down is where the returner never makes it to the wall because somebody has leaked from the outside. So we want that off returner to pick up any leakage. If we can get the return man to the wall, we'll probably have a successful return. We emphasize when and practice when the go call comes, and when the returner is getting closer to the wall, 6 to 8 yards away from the wall, he gives the wall a go call so that they can start their movement. Once there's any split, once there's any daylight, after the go call, the returner takes that daylight and gets upfield. We're not looking to follow the wall very long. We're just going to follow it long enough till we see daylight. Another twist that we've put in is we will have the wall open to one side or the other and have the return guy cross behind it. It's been a nice twist for us. Another thing I would suggest is the return personnel, whether it be the one that's caught it or the blocker, should get straight upfield until the last second, then angle over to where the wall is. This draws a number of people away from the wall, and at the last second, you can duck in behind the ball. So our return personnel are told wherever the ball is caught, we're going to get straight upfield until we get to the point where we need to get over to get behind the wedge. In this manner, we set up some blocks for later on. Our Moses return is a combination of a man and area return. Since we do have some man responsibilities, we have to number that kickoff team. We choose to number the kickoff team 1 through 5 on the left, 1 through 5 on the right. We never count the kicker. Should they be kicking from the hash, we simply ignore the kicker and still number 1 through 5, 1 through 5. So the kicker is never counted, and we always have 5 guys to one side, 5 guys to the other. When the ball is kicked, our personnel, our 2, 3, and 4 personnel, the inside portion of our front 5, they are going to man block individuals on our opponent's kickoff team. Our number 2 is responsible for their left number 4. Our number 3 is responsible for their left number 5. Our number 4 is responsible for their right number 5. If at all possible, we want to take these players towards the outside. However, if we can just get on them and ride them one way or the other, we'll take that. In our Moses return, the idea is that we're going to split the field just like Moses split the water, and it's going to be a middle return. The play starts out with the majority of our opponents on the outside of the hash marks. We want to end up with a play with the majority of our opponents on the outside of the hash marks. To accomplish this, our numbers 2, 3, and 4 players, the inside players on our front 5, they're going to be responsible for the inside players on our opponent's team. So number 2 will block left 4. Number 3 will block left 5. Number 4 will block right 5. And hopefully we'll push them towards the outside of the field, or in other words, to the outside of the wall. But in essence, we'll take them any way they want to go. Every other player on the kickoff return will then form a wall on either hash. Our players, number 1, 6, and 7, will form the left wall of the Moses return. They'll get a placement at approximately the 35-yard line on back, have one player every 5 yards. So number 2 will align on the 35, number 1 will align on the 40, number 6 will align on the 30-yard line, number 7 will align on the 25-yard line. So we've got a nice little wall there. If a player should come down, they just want to push that player outside and back. So they're worried about the only in front of them. They're going to step up and push the player back behind them. On the opposite side, players 4, 5, 8, and 9 are going to be responsible for that wall in an appropriate manner. There again, as players come downfield, they're not going to let them come to the inside. They're going to step and force that player to go back and behind, down the wall, if you will, and allow our return guys to get up the middle. Again, the returners will communicate who's going to get the football, me, you. They're going to try and get to the wall. The first guy is going to lead the second guy to the wall. Once you get inside the wall, you're looking for daylight. You're going to hit it upfield. We've come close on this to returning some kickoff returns, and we feel like that it's a sound return, and we're going to get better at it as time goes on. All right, let's take a look at some video of our Moses return. See how we line up, try and get into the wall, and then hit the opening. So we'll take a little look at video here. You'll notice the guys up front, a couple of them have man responsibilities. Everybody else is making 2 picket fences inside the hashes. The return guys are trying to try and get right up the middle. We end up with a short kick here, so things happen relatively quickly. But you'll notice our players lining on, making 2 picket fences. We get a little bit of leakage inside, so one of our individuals that had man assignment let someone get away, and then we just get the ball straight up the field trying to find a seam. Here's another example of the Moses return. This ball's kicked outside of our intended wall, but we really work hard to get back into the wall, make something happen. So the first return guy is able to knock off first punt kickoff personnel. Then we're able to get up into the wall and make something happen. So once again, the Moses return. Okay, let's take a second to look at some PAT or field goal block philosophies, some things to keep in mind. In my opinion, a push from the inside has a better likelihood to block the kick than coming off the edge. Although you see edge rushers all the time, I think that the blocks come from the inside more often than not. One idea you might do is take your best bull rusher and put it on their weakest lineman. Take your best leaper, put them right on the inside gap. We'll show you in a drawing here in a minute. But take advantage of who their weakest blocker is and try and get an inside push. Your best bull rusher and your best leaper right on their weakest lineman, you'll get some blocks. Next, only send rushers from one side or the other. Don't send them from both sides. Too often, guys will knock each other off, or even they'll see each other out of the corner of their eye and they'll pull up. And so you don't get a decent rush if you're sending outside rushers from both sides, one side or the other. Next, I would think it would be a good idea to hide those responsible for coverage. Don't give your opponent an advantage of knowing who's responsible for who in coverage unless you have to. Finally, if it's a long field goal, I would suggest you drop a free safety, return type of person, and try and set up any sort of return. That free safety's responsibility in coverage is going to have to be replaced by a middle linebacker, outside linebacker, but I would certainly suggest that any long field goal attempt has somebody back for return as opposed to rushing and covering with all 11. Okay, so here's what we do at Mountain Range High School. We set up our PAT block so that if it's coming from the outside from one side, it's coming from the inside on the opposite side. Block left, the inside block is going to be right. If I have block right, where the outside block is coming from the right, the inside block will come from the left. In this particular case, in this drawing, we have what we've identified as their worst lineman. That's the lineman with the X here. So we put our best bull rusher right over the top of him, and we put our best leaper right on the inside gap. Remember, you have to stay off the center here, so you might want to pick the worst lineman out of the tackle or tight end and leave the guards out of it, so you're not rushing that A gap and taking a chance on hitting the center. In this case, the left tackle is going to be what we've identified as their worst tight end, so we put our best bull rusher there our best leaper here, and they're working in tandem. They're going to come, our rusher is going to come to the inside edge as our bull rusher is going to try and blow over what we feel is their worst lineman. At the same time, we have our corner and our strong safety coming off the edge, forcing the wing to block one or the other. If the wing turns out and takes the corner, the strong safety is going to go for the block. If the wing takes a strong safety, the corner goes for the block. When blocking a PAT or field goal, we tell our kids it's okay to lay out now. We expect our kids to lay out. This is different from a punt. You're not as likely to get a roughing the kicker call because of the motion of the kicker. So we will go ahead and lay out and get the ball right off the tee if possible. The expectation on PAT and field goal is to lay out. Most of our blocks, though, come from the inside. Our rushers come up and get a piece from the inside. That happens more often than getting it from the edge. As far as coverage, our corners, our weak side corner away from the block is responsible for number 1 away from the block. Our outside backer is responsible for number 2. Our inside backer lines up in a gap, but he's going to fold back and look for fake to either direction. So he doesn't have necessarily pass responsibilities, but he is going to run down fake. He simply aligns in this gap and then drops out for that same idea. Is we're going to try and hide who's responsible for coverage. On the play side where the block's coming, the corner's coming, so therefore cannot be involved in coverage, the free safety will take number 1. He's going to sneak over late. Doesn't necessarily need to be over the top of number 1 when the ball's snapped, but he knows he's responsible for number 1 on the block side. Should this be a long field goal, we'll drop our free safety back, and now our inside linebacker is responsible for number 1. So either way, one of these two guys is going to be responsible. The strong safety's coming or has an opportunity to come for block, so he cannot be responsible for coverage. In that case, our outside backer here, number 3 guy, on the block side, on the line of scrimmage, is going to be responsible. If we should get some sort of throwback, our linebacker that's bailing here knows that he's responsible for number 3. So if the kicker or a holder somehow go opposite, that's going to be our inside backer's responsibility. Quite frankly, though, we're expecting people to get to the ball before any chance of throwback gets there. Okay, let's take a look at some video clips of our PAT field goal block so you can see how we come off the edge, but more importantly, get a push up the middle. All right, here we have our PAT block team on the field. On this side of the formation is where our block is coming from the outside. We've identified their worst player as this guard right here, so we have our best bull lineman here and our best jumper coming behind him. So we get 2 ways of blocking this, one coming from the outside, one from the inside. Okay, here we have another example of our PAT block. Again, the block is coming out over here from the right. We have middle blockers coming up the middle and jumping. Okay, I hope you've got something out of this. If you just picked up 1 or 2 things that's going to do you some good, then it's worthwhile. Emphasize the aggressive nature of special teams play and give it ample amount of practice time, and it's going to pay off dividends for you this season. Good luck.